Welcome back to Abel's Treasures. Today we have the opportunity to talk to Timothy. Timothy has an entrepreneur spirit at heart, but he has a background in television, executive, as well as flipping lawnmowers. I can't wait until you hear those stories. So we're going to jump right into it, but before we do, I want to remind you to hit that bell notification, subscribe, and comment below what you got out of this conversation. Remember, wait till the end, as I'll have my 3 items that I pulled from our conversation. There's so much more. So again, pay attention, take notes, and I'll see you at the end. All right, Timothy, welcome to my channel. I do appreciate you coming on. Again, like we talked about off camera, my channel is primarily for small business, also kind of directed to resellers, but I really like the first time we talked, your mindset on how that works. So before we get into that part of it, will you talk a little bit about who you are and a little bit of your background?
Sure, Abel, and thank you very much for the opportunity to chat with you. It's very enjoyable to connect with you, and you and I have had a couple of very pleasant and meaningful interactions, and so I appreciate the opportunity to do this with you. So my background, I'm old, so I've had a lot of experience. It's really kind of hard to know even where to start, but I'm from Toronto originally, from Southern Ontario. Moved to the States about 25 years ago for a business opportunity in the Midwest in Omaha, Nebraska, which is where I am right now. And had a family home here ever since. So 3 kids, all raised here in the Midwest with good Midwestern values. 3 boys, all very successful. They survived their parenting. I give all the credit to their mother for their successful lives. And here I am, like everybody else, working out of my basement for the last 2 years after about 25 years as a road warrior. So my background, very briefly, is in television news, network television up in Toronto for about 10 years, international political correspondent, and then I pivoted into business many years ago, and in that course of that career, I've really probably had about 10 business or 15 business incarnations in the course of one business career. I've actually been very, very fortunate as far as that goes. So I've had 4 internet startups. First one crashed and burned, so lost a lot of money and learned some expensive lessons. Second one did little smarter and applied the lessons, and that one went very well, so had a successful exit there. And did a couple more after that. One did sort of okay, and one kind of went sideways, but they're still in business and pivoting in various different directions as the market opportunities and technology evolve and present themselves. The other half of my career has been with large multi-billion-dollar global corporations. So I've done a lot of work internationally. Latin America, Europe, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, Middle East, Southeast Asia, India, China, over the years in various leadership and executive roles, primarily around business development, sales, and operations. So I've had a very varied career, and have made a lot of mistakes. And so that kind of brings us around to one of the things you and I talked about right at the very beginning, which is actually the whole notion of success and failure. Mm-hmm. So we can talk about that.
That's definitely what I want to get at first. I have additional questions, but talk to me what you think success and failure is and what it means to you.
Sure. So as I think you and I talked about previously, Abel, I mean, really in my own experience and having a lot of failures, realized that wasn't really kind of the proper lens to look at life through. And so what I've really done is I've kind of taken the 2 terms, success and failure, or success and mistakes, out of my lexicon altogether. And the way I look at it is really more in terms of a lesson. And life is really just one big lesson. It's a journey, and we learn lessons, or we don't learn lessons, and we need to repeat those lessons until we do learn them. So what I find is helpful is if I discard the notions of success and failure and just talk about lessons, pleasant lessons and unpleasant lessons. The pleasant lessons we call success, the unpleasant lessons we call failures. But they're really neither successes nor failures. They're just lessons. Some things we learn work, some things we learn don't work. And I think that the most important thing in all of this to keep in mind is really the mindset, which is a learning mindset. And if you don't have a learning mindset, you will literally never learn. What I mean by that is you can have successes, i.e. pleasant lessons, or you can have failures, i.e. unpleasant lessons, and learn from neither if you don't have a learning mindset. And what I equate it to is walking into a classroom every day. And you and I have both been to school. Everybody listening to this podcast has been to school, and you know what it's like. You walk into the classroom and you really have two options. You can either sit down, pay attention, and learn, or you can sit there, daydream, space off, and bug your fellow students and learn absolutely nothing, and walk out of that classroom at the end of the day as dumb as when you walked in there. Right. Or you can say, you know what, I've got something to learn here, and I'm going to pay attention, and you walk out with more knowledge. And life is the same way. I mean, we can choose to go through life basically, as dumb as exited, as dumb as the day we entered it, and not learn lessons of life. Or we can take that learning mindset and realize that every single day when we get up in the morning at 8 o'clock in the morning and walk into the classroom of life, we have that same opportunity as we did when we were kids and walked into a classroom. And we can either learn from that day or not learn from that day. And if you learn from that day, good on you, because over time, what you'll do is hopefully refine the approach, have more pleasant lessons, i.e. successes, and fewer unpleasant lessons, i.e. failures. And maybe at the end of the day, when you're even a lot older than I am, maybe you start to accumulate wisdom, which is really a combination of instinct and experience. You put those two together and you have wisdom. And you're able to make better decisions out of the gate than you might have earlier in your career when you have neither experience nor really, in many cases, instinct. And instinct is often very much a product of experience. So that's kind of the approach that I take.
I really like that approach. I like that thought process. And to challenge you a little bit on that would be, okay, it's a thought process, but how do you put that into action when you have a lesson that it doesn't go the way you want it to go, and you may be down on yourself? You personally, what do you do to get past that? Mentally, maybe physically, like working out. What do you do to make sure that you're not dwelling on it, but you do take the lesson?
That's a great question, Abel. And, like everybody else, I'm human, and we all have emotional reactions to things, right? Mm-hmm. Positive emotional reactions to pleasant lessons and negative emotional reactions to unpleasant lessons. So to your point, the thing that's really important to keep in mind in all of this is a sense of perspective. So when you have an unpleasant lesson or a failure, you're absolutely right. I mean, the emotional response, the natural response is to get down on yourself. Woe is me. What did I screw up? I'll never be successful. I'll never get out of this. I've lost all this money. Things didn't work out the way they did. I'm a nut. I'm a failure. I just might as well go and, fold the tent or go do something less challenging, whatever that happens to be. Very, very understandable. But what you have to understand is that it's important to separate that emotional reaction from the growth opportunity or the lesson, and to be able to consciously step back, take 5 or take 10, and say, okay, wait a minute. I'm having an emotional reaction. Not worthwhile and not productive. What I need to do is take a step back and realize, wait a second. What's happening here? Listen. It's a lesson. And be able to take an objective view of what may be a subjective reaction. And the objective view is, what am I being taught by this experience? And that's really the question you've got to ask yourself. What is life trying to teach me right now? What lesson do I need to be paying attention to right now? And get through as best you can that cloud or that fog of emotional reaction. And it's not easy to do. I mean, it's something you really have to discipline yourself to do and remind yourself to do and practice doing it. Because, we all have setbacks, we all have failures, we all have things that don't go the way we want them to. And it's very natural when things like that happen to say, oh man, this is really bad. And, you fall into that well of despair. Right. So when you're at the edge of that well of despair, it's important to realize that you're at the edge of the well of despair and say, wait a minute, life is trying to teach me something here. I need to take a step back, gain some perspective, look at it objectively, and try to basically parse that out and figure out, okay, at the end of today's lesson, what do I need to learn, and how can I apply that going forward in order to spend less time on the edge of the well of despair?
Yeah.
It's not easy. And one of the things that might even be helpful is if you actually, write it out, like write it out on a card or something like that, and put it over your desk so that you remind yourself when things don't go well, aha, life is teaching me a lesson. I need to pay attention.
I like that. I like that. Kind of, we're going to pivot a little bit into the business aspect outside of the mindset. You mentioned you had 4 internet companies, startups. Can you tell me something that you learned by opening that first internet company? I know you mentioned that it was a lesson that you learned and the other ones were more successful, but what was something that you learned from that?
I'd say, well, there's obviously a whole bunch of lessons because I made a whole bunch of mistakes and had a whole pile of failures. So there was plenty of lessons to be learned. But I think probably, Abel, if I had to sort of narrow down on one lesson in particular, like if I was to try to distill the experience and try to pull the most important lesson out of it, I would say the most important lesson that I learned was about the team. You've got to have the right team. You've got to have the right people around you, with you, beside you, mentoring you, working with you, bucking you up, supporting you, helping you with the positive lessons and helping you with the negative lessons. And you really, really, I mean, talk about entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs always think, I think it might be his mindset, well, I'm an entrepreneur, I can do it on my own. Well, no, you can't. The most important thing is to realize that you can't do it on your own and to be thoughtful and to be planful about who you collaborate with, who you get advice from, who you talk to, who you work with, who you collaborate with at all levels in order to do more of the right things and fewer of the wrong things. And I would say that if I had to distill all those experiences in the 4 startups, and even, of course, the large, global corporations, it really comes down to the people. It sounds like an aphorism or, some kind of a, time-worn cliche, but it is absolutely true. It's all about the people. And if you have and work with and listen to the right people, it's going to literally mean the difference between success and failure, between pleasant lessons and unpleasant lessons. And part of that is recognizing when you are with the right people, and part of it is recognizing when you're not with the right people, and to cut yourself loose from those that are going to hold you back, and to bring more people into your circle that are going to positively influence your outcomes.
How do you weed those out, though? One of the things that you mentioned was leadership, and that definitely hits home to me. That's something I've studied and wanted to be in my corporate life. But a leader can also be just by yourself, the way you hold yourself. So how do you make sure you weed out the people that may be holding you back? And because what I'm thinking is, okay, I'm going to weed them out, I'm going to get away from them, but at the same time, I would want to help them. So how do you balance that?
Well, that last line, Abel, is actually very interesting. And this is going to sound counterintuitive, and it may not resonate with some of the people that are listening to this, but I think sometimes you really got to be kind of selfish. Okay. And you say you may want to help these people. You can't help anybody until you first help yourself. Okay. And you've got to be really careful about that, because one of the, I guess probably one of the most deleterious or detrimental kinds of people that you can surround yourself with or have a relationship with is what I call a parasite. And they will literally suck your time, suck your energy, suck your expertise, suck your money, and suck your success. And so even though, because you're a good guy, I'm a good guy, our instinct is to help people, right?
Right.
But we really need to be very planful and very careful about making sure that we help ourselves first. Because if you don't do that, if you don't have a solid foundation, you're just going to expend all of your capital, like both your financial capital, but also your personal capital, on everybody else, and have nothing to show for it for yourself. Yeah. And the reason I say that is because I've made that mistake time and again. I, by nature, am a pretty nice guy. I like to help people. I like to do the right thing. I like to support other people, and have sometimes done that to my own detriment. And so when you're trying to get a business going and really trying to start something, absolutely, you want to help people, but you're going to be able to help more people by first being able to help yourself and be successful yourself. And so to your earlier question, how do you identify, those helpful influences or positive influences, and how do you identify the negative influences and then separate yourself from those that are negative? Again, it comes back to what we were talking about a minute ago, learning the lesson, right? So it's really about being able to take a step back. That's very, very important. I mean, every day you need to be able to take a step back and look at things and be able to get some perspective. Stop the weeds, stop the noise, shut off your phone, close the door, ignore the noise for even 5 or 10 minutes in order to just spend a bit of time thinking, okay, what's working, what's not working, who's not working, what relationships are working, what relationships aren't working, and be brutally honest about it. Be brutally honest, because at the end of the day, a business is not a charity. If you're starting a business, you are starting something that does one thing. And forget all the fluff. It does one thing. It makes money. Yeah. If it doesn't make money, it's not a business. It's a hobby, or it's a nonprofit, which might be nice and fuzzy, but it's not a business. So if you're focused on a business, you are focused on one thing: money. And it has to happen, or you don't have a business. And if you don't have a business, nothing else happens. And if you don't have money, nothing happens. So it sounds mercenary and it sounds harsh, but it's not. It's just realistic.
Yeah. I'm listening. I'm taking that in, and I'm on the other side. So I'm happy we're having this conversation, because I want to challenge you on a couple of things. I actually just did a video the other day regarding my goals for 2022 and what my core values are. And my goals for 2022 don't matter if they're not in line with my core values. And one of my core values is helping people. And in that video, I talked about making that money is going to provide me the flexibility to be able to do other things that I want the business to be able to do by helping other people. But you hit a key there. If I'm not making the money, I'm not going to have the flexibility. I'm still going to be doing my day job and then doing my e-commerce job in the evening and not be able to help like I want. So I agree, and maybe that's definitely something I'm going to take in a little bit more and kind of let it marinate as I think through it. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, Abel. And I'm not saying, don't be charitable and don't get involved in philanthropy and all the rest of it. But what I'm saying is that it's difficult to cut and dole out pieces of pie when the pie you've got is only this big and there's barely enough for yourself. You can do a lot more with a pie that's this big.
Right. I like that. So again, a lot of my audience are small business people that may be doing it as a side hustle, where they're selling things on Poshmark, Mercari, eBay. We talked, one of our first conversation was you bought lawnmowers and you were able to flip them. So is that something that you enjoy doing as a hobby, or was that a one-time thing?
Oh no, I mean, I guess the entrepreneur is deeply in my DNA. So yeah, I mean, I always love buying low and selling high. Who wouldn't? I mean, and I enjoy not just the financial interaction, but I really enjoy the people interaction. And so I don't do this as a business or anything like that. The reselling, I honestly just do it as just kind of a hobby, I guess, more than anything else. But I'll tell you, so I sell most of my stuff on Nextdoor. Okay. And I guess the reason I like that is because I wind up then having a personal interaction with the buyers. And I can tell you that without exception, the last, 2 or 3 years, I've just been doing that just, for fun out of the garage. Mm-hmm. I have had the most fun conversations and met the nicest people and had the most enjoyable interactions that had nothing at all to do with selling a lawnmower or selling a bike, and everything to do with just meeting somebody and having a nice chat and having an opportunity to maybe help them. I'll tell you one of the best lawnmower stories I have is, I think I told you I bought, at the end of the season, just happened to walk into Walmart and they're selling brand new lawnmowers for $20. I mean, how can you lose on that? Right. So I bought a bunch of lawnmowers and kept them in the garage all winter to much of my wife's delight. But in the spring, I sold them, and one of the lawnmowers I sold was to a young man, a young teenager, maybe 15 or something, 14 or 15 years old, and he came up with his dad. And his dad said, well, this is your transaction. You run the deal. And it turned out that, his son wanted to get into the lawn mowing business, wanted to get into landscaping and lawn cutting. And so this was his opportunity to really, buy his first lawnmower. And so his dad basically turned it over to him and said, here you go. You talk to this guy and, figure out what he's got, see if the lawnmower is something you want. You negotiate the price. I mean, all of it. And of course, I gave him a great deal on it.
Yeah.
I wanted to help the kid out, but
right.
it was just fun because that was like a fun little interaction. Here's a young guy starting out in business, 14, 15 years old, whatever, doing something for the summertime to make his own money. And I can be a part of that. I can help him with that, and that's satisfying, and that's enjoyable. So I would say that for me, Abel, it's not even really. And I, take back what I said earlier about, at least in the reselling side of it, It's not about the money. I have a day job, executive positions that are my day job, but I just enjoy doing it because, it makes a little bit of cash money, and on the one hand, and mostly on the other hand, really allows me to have these enjoyable experiences that otherwise I wouldn't be open or wouldn't be availed of.
No, and I agree with that. That's actually one of the reasons when I first started this, I had more fun talking to people at garage sales, finding vintage items and appreciating there's a story behind whatever I just picked up. A 1970 G.I. Joe that has been played with, and one of the people that I was talking to told me the story. I remember playing with it then at this time, and I bought a dollhouse, and she's like, this was my dollhouse. And they are connected with it. There's a story behind anything that I pick up. And that's something I appreciate, that connection with those kind of people and getting to know people in my community. But not only that, getting to know what really drives people in that nostalgia. I am still going to sell it, but at least I can appreciate it as I'm moving it on to the next person.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah, it's very cool. And I think that's why I'm addicted to it is the people more. Trust me, I'm addicted to the flip and seeing a profit of $50 to $500, all of a sudden. But really, it is that connections with people that I'm enjoying the most. And now it's taken me to this, doing YouTube and things like that. So I'm able to connect with even more people and continue to expand. So it's been a blessing on this journey. To your point, it's fun meeting those people.
And so so the reselling was just kind of an accident. I can't remember how I got started. I think I had an extra bike. I love bikes. I love biking. Mm-hmm. So that's one of my favorite exercises in cycling. But I don't think that I needed six bicycles. I think, or 7 bicycles, whatever I had. So I was instructed by the management here that I needed to start selling some bikes. So right. I sold some bikes, and that's kind of what got me started at it.
I like it. So let's go back to the business portion of it. You mentioned executive as your day job, things like that. So as somebody who wants a small business, who's building, with the experience that you have as building your own, as an executive going international, what advice would you give me and others in my position?
Again, great question, Abel. So I think the probably the most important thing is be patient with yourself and realize that you really got to take it a step at a time. I also equate this kind of a thing to a mountain. Everybody sees Mount Everest or K2 or Annapurna mm-hmm. or the Matterhorn or something like that, and they say, you know what, I want to be at the top of the mountain. Well, that's great, but how are you going to get there? And nobody, unless you're in a helicopter, gets to the top of the mountain in a single jump. Right. Every trip up the mountain is one step in front of the other. You got to slog ahead one step in front of the other. They take you up the mountain, but it's a gradual, slow process. And along the way, you might have slips, you might have falls, you might have avalanches, you might have snowstorms, blizzards. You may not even make it. You may have to go back down again. This happens all the time in mountain climbing, right? It's too dangerous to get to the summit in a single push. And they go back and, try again. And sometimes try 3 or 4 or 5 times, over the course of months or years before they finally make it. So I think that's a very helpful analogy when you're growing a business, is to really be planful about, putting the processes in place and doing the proper preparations and being patient with yourself. And like I said, applying those lessons that you learn every day or every week or every month in order to try to make yourself more successful and make, fewer mistakes and have more wins. But I think that not trying to the shortcuts. The shortcuts don't work. In my experience, they don't work. At the end of the day, you still got to do it. You still got to put the process. You still got to put the workflow. You still got to do the work with the clients. You still got to prepare the marketing plan and be thinking about that, and implementing it thoughtfully. Because if you don't do that, at some point it's going to collapse on you, and you're probably going to be further behind the eight ball than you were at the beginning.
Yeah, I like that. Another question that I kind of got from what you were saying, you were just listing off things, the marketing plan, this, that, and the other. As a small business owner, as an executive, you have to manage your time. What is your philosophy on time management?
That's a great one. And especially in today's world, where the distractions are more evident than ever, I think probably the most important thing is to really be able to turn things off so you can focus. All day, every day. I mean, right now on my desk here, I've got my iPad. It's turned off, okay, so it doesn't distract me. I'm on my phone right now with you, and it's very, very tempting to have those distractions basically chew up vast chunks of your day. And before you know it, in between Instagram and TikTok and Facebook and LinkedIn and God knows what all, you've burned 4 or 5 hours and really have nothing to show for it.
Right.
So the most important thing, I think, is really to try to discipline yourself and stick to the plan and shut things off in order to minimize the distractions. It's not going to be 100% successful every day. Sometimes you'll backslide. Some days you won't have a very productive day because things are happening or the phone's ringing or you do get distracted. But the key thing is to really be mindful of that and to try to set out your daily plan, take the time to plan every day with your daily goals, and try to break it down, like climbing the mountain, break it down into small steps. You might have these big strategic, in 5 years, I want to have a $50 million business. Great. How are you going to get there? Well, you're going to get there 1 minute at a time, 1 hour at a time, 1 day at a time. That's how it happens. So I think that it's very important, besides the distractions in terms of time management, to look at things sort of in small chunks, in small bites. I'll give you an example. So Elon Musk is famous for his literally 5-minute meetings. He has 15-minute meetings that are big meetings. The small meetings are 5-minute meetings. And the reason he does that is so that you're very, very focused, you get things chunked out, and there's no wasted time and a lot of other unnecessary fluff and a lot of unnecessary, activity or dialogue. And again, it sounds mercenary, and it is, because in a way you have to be mercenary with yourself about your time. And if you're not mercenary, what will happen is that the time just kind of gets frittered away and you have nothing to show for it. So I guess if I was to summarize, what I would say is, try to plan your day in small chunks. Okay. And then have a focused 15, 20 minutes, half an hour, 45 minutes, whatever that is, and then knock something out in that period of time, and then move on to the next chunk, so that by the end of the day, you've got 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 or 20 chunks of things done that have fit into little time blocks, but you're really starting to accomplish on your goals. It's much easier to do it that way in small bites, almost like having a meal, right? You don't just eat the plate all at once. You eat it in small bites. Your day's no different. And you will accomplish more over that period of time. And at the end of the week, at the end of the month, you'll have had some substantial progress.
Thank you. Thank you. Close to the end of our time, so I want to make sure I get my final question. Hey, my name is Abel's Treasure. And one of the treasures for me, I believe, is connections with people. So thank you for coming on and taking the time to have a conversation with me. But what is your greatest treasure?
I think it's what we talked about at the beginning of the conversation, Abel, which is absolutely people. Whether it's in business or in life, there's really nothing that can replace that. And what's interesting is that, I think some entrepreneurs, they sort of start the journey because they want to be wealthy. And I guess my take on that is that I've always said, you can't stuff a Ferrari into your heart. I don't care how nice that Ferrari is. You can't shove it into your heart. You can't shove the Lamborghini, the yacht, the jet, whatever. You can't put any of that in your heart. That's always outside. The only thing you can put into your heart is relationships, is people. And at the end of the day, what's truly satisfying when all these other things are taken away, the Lamborghini gets a flat tire, the jet doesn't pass the certification, the yacht sinks, the house burned, whatever. At the end of the day, what you carry with you all day, every day, for the rest of your life is those relationships. And those are in your heart. And the only thing that gets into your heart is people, or maybe your pets as well. But people. The rest of it is all external. And so if you were to talk about the treasures in life, I would say that without question, the most meaningful and the most valuable of those are your relationships.
Timothy, I agree. The most valuable is relationships, and I really enjoyed your analogy that you're not able to take a vehicle or an item and put it into your heart. It's really those people, those connections with people. Now, it is my job to pull out 3 items that I took away from the conversation. Again, there's so much more, and since he does live close by, Timothy, I'm going to hit you up when I'm in Omaha, and I'd like to take you to lunch and continue to pick your brain. I enjoyed our conversation, so thank you very much. Now, those 3 items. Number 1, separate the emotional reaction from the lesson. I really like that conversation that we had, or what he was talking about is, what is life teaching you? So pause, take a moment, and analyze that lesson that you're learning, positive or negative. What is life trying to teach you? Take that lesson and move forward from there. Number 2, you're not going to do this alone. If you are building a successful business, you are going to need to build people around you, have people around you to continue to move forward, to help motivate you, to get different ideas to create that business. You hear the term solopreneur, things like that, and in reality, nobody does it alone. So that solopreneur is going to create relationships with the vendor. They're going to have relationships with friends that will help them move along. So don't think that you're doing it by yourself, and make sure you thank those people as you continue your journey. Finally, number 3. Number 3 is be patient. I agree with that because it's hard to be patient. And that's something I struggle with at times. I want to be successful right now, but you have to trust that process. Timothy mentioned having those processes in place and analyzing if they're working, and being able to pivot from them. So continue to write down what your process is, work through that process, adjust it as you go, and finally, be patient with that process because it will make you successful. As always, connections with people is the greatest treasure. Take care of each other.